Thanks so much, Nefford and Isaac, for inviting me. And lovely to be here, though I can't actually see anyone. I'm just looking at a blank screen because I just see a bunch of names. But I'm sure you've all got wonderful smiling faces. There we go. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for saying hello. So look, I think it's 7 o'clock in the morning for you, so I'm sure you're all driving to or getting ready for work. So I'll share my screen, and this only got set up about a week or two ago, so I'm basically. Isaac, can you let me share my screen, please? But I'll keep talking while that's happening. So we set this up a few weeks ago, where Isaac and Nefford contacted me about lifestyle medicine and potentially how to work with you over there and potentially set up any number of things relevant to lifestyle medicine. So we thought we'd start with this just to define lifestyle medicine. What it is, what is some evidence behind it, what are some mechanisms of action, and what are some sort of practice systems in the application that we sort of see globally.
You may share your slides.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers. So a few caveats from me first. One is that I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for this, so I apologize that I haven't adapted my statistics and other things to East Africa, Kenya. I apologize, but the truth is these are really globally applicable, a lot of what I'm going to be sharing, so that doesn't matter too much. I've had a chat, like I said, to Nefford and Isaac about perhaps some of the topics. So I've focused a bit on diabetes, some heart disease, mental health sort of things, and it's a huge field. It's a massive field. So I'm going to do what I can, and some areas I'm going to skim through because some of these are notes. I've written multiple postgraduate subjects on this field, and so I'm going to just condense it for you into something hopefully enjoyable and useful. So as Isaac said, I'm a GP, which is a family physician here in Australia. I'm not sure what it's called in other places, but I'm a clinical one, meaning I work in practice, and I'm also an academic, meaning I teach a lot of lifestyle medicine and general practice. And I have a podcast, and I consult for government, and I consult for philanthropy on lifestyle medicine because there's a huge interest in it across the world. And as Isaac said, there's also the World Lifestyle Medicine Organization, and I'm on the executive committee for that. So this is what I'll be talking about, and I've already mentioned that, so I'm going to skim through that. And just a few points here that I don't know, if we had more time, I would love to speak to you and hear your story and meet you properly. So I apologize that we don't have that time today, but hopefully we will one day. But I will say that if your experiences are from what I hear speaking to Isaac and many other people around the world, is that there's just something that doesn't feel quite right in healthcare. There's a huge amount of good that is done, but there is an enormous burden and emerging of chronic disease, and people are getting sicker and sicker in that chronic disease sense. There's a lot of burnout in the health profession because of the huge amount of load, and the budgets and the expense of this chronic disease, which is being managed almost exclusively by medication, is very expensive. Now, again, to say that, of course, all those things, medications, surgery, crucially important to a good life and saving life. So there's nothing about that. But what we're talking about here, and this comes from Sir Michael Marmot, who's essentially the sort of father of public health in the world, and did the major sort of social determinants of health papers about in the 60s and 70s. He says, medicine isn't wrong, it's just incomplete. And so what we're talking here about is completing medicine with a holistic biopsychosocial, cultural, and even spiritual approach to healthcare. And some people call it the third arm of healthcare: lifestyle medicine, pharmacological medicine, and procedural medicine. I would add psychological medicine into that, so third or fourth arm, whatever it be. So that's just a little caveat, not to say it's a panacea. Now, this is an Australian slide, but the point is, again, that this is globally the trend, that we're moving from, so this is Australia federal government's 10-year plan, and it only came out last year. And the point simply is to say that we recognize that we're an illness system, that we focus on the problem, we focus on pharmaceutical treatments, and it's very fragmented. Now, what we want to move towards is a holistic system that takes into account all of the aspects, that is connected and coordinated and really focused on community and individual well-being. Now, that sounds great, but how do you do that? And that's where lifestyle medicine comes in, because we're trying to answer that question. So as we know, And as you know, in the past, and sadly still in many places, infectious illness at a young age was and is a leading cause of mortality and morbidity. So that's clearly super important. But sadly, we've also now got this emerging massive chronic disease trend, and that's not news to any of you, I'm sure. I'm sure you've seen over the last 10 years, 15 years, the rates of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease, autoimmune diseases, dementias, etc., coming on the horizon and being significant. If we take diabetes, for example, and this is a paper that was published in the Lancet a couple of years back, where they looked at the rates of diabetes, and I've highlighted here on the right of the screen East Africa, but you can look at the global trend. As I say, this is not a localized problem. Some populations are much more sensitive to it, like the Polynesians, Micronesians, etc. But in countries like Australia, the prevalence of diabetes tripled over a 20-year period, and that trend is continuing. So this is, we need other approaches, and that when we just manage it with medication, all we do is add more and more people to the wagon that have diabetes. And how do we primarily manage this? Well, medications. And again, they have their role, but if we overuse them, we cause problems. I won't go on about this in too much detail, but just simply to say that now Australians pre-COVID, 1 in 8 were on antidepressants. Now 1 in 6 are on antidepressants. Almost 100% of people with diabetes are on medication. And hopefully you'll see soon, as I get through the slides, that actually that's not necessary. It's really, truly not necessary if we do lifestyle medicine well. So of course, some people need antidepressants and they should have them. However, a lot of the time it's not necessary. And because of this culture of medicine that's emerged over the last probably 30 years, with the advent of pharmaceutical companies being rather large, you can see trends like this. And what you see here is the prescribing rates, and I'll explain it for those that can't look, so please drive safely if you're driving. I'll talk around it. That went back, sorry. This is the prescribing rates of antidepressants in the United Kingdom, so Scotland, England, and Wales. And they've doubled the amount of, and this is the same in Australia. I don't know what the Kenyan stats are, and I apologize. But the rates of antidepressant prescribing have doubled in the 10 years, just 10 years before COVID. That was before COVID. So it's gone up way more since then. So we are on this trajectory, which is slightly worrying. And major institutes that have been done, major reviews that have been done in the last few years have said business as usual is not an option. We all need to take a look at how medicine is being delivered in urban centres, in rural and remote centres, which Australia is a big challenge for us. We've got a very significant remote, rural and First Nations population, and that we have to respond to that. So we need to look freshly. And this is if you can't see the picture, it's just a path that splits into two. And the point being is that we're at this crossroads and we need to make a decision where we go. And Lao Tzu, who's the founder of Taoism, says if we do not change direction, we may end up where we're heading. And so I ask, if we continue on this direction, where are we going to be in 10 to 20 years with budgets, with burden, and with burnout? I can see some chat there. Oh, it's just emails. That's good. All right. So what is lifestyle medicine? Okay, so I've made my case that change is necessary. Now to define what is proposed by many around the world now as a solution, or at least one of the solutions, lifestyle medicine. So lifestyle medicine is what it sounds like. It's the medicine of different aspects of the way we live our lives. Mind-body practices like breathwork, meditation, prayer, contemplation, etc. Relaxation therapies, and so on. Nutrition and diet, which includes fasting and fasting methodologies. Physical activity and movement, sleep quality and quantity, reduction of harmful substances and screens is a major problem. Connection with community, connection with land, and connection with sort of, and in many cultures, sort of ancestry as well. And so they're the sort of pillars of lifestyle medicine. And then we've got the drivers of lifestyle medicine. And the drivers are things like improved communication techniques and health coaching, behavior change science. And what that means is we're kind of trying to use all those tricks that Coca-Cola and Adidas have been using to make us buy crap for years, and we're going to use those same science to help people actually live a good life. So we're trying to use those powers for good. Then we think about the models of care, which is the services with which we operate in. And it's very important, and I'll give lots of examples of this throughout this talk. But that's thinking about, again, the systems and the practices with which we operate in, because they can either be conducive to this style of practice or they can be very inhibitive, which a lot of modern care is. And then, of course, there's the technology component, meaning there's lots of digital options emerging, both from a biometric wearable point of view and also from a delivery point of view, and telehealth and all kinds of things there. And then research and academia, clearly. And at the end of the day, all of this must be personalized and culturally adapted. And that's really important because it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. There's always a relationship with both the patient/client and the communities, because a lot of this work does actually come down to micro environments, meaning communities, workplaces, schools, and so on. So I'll come back to that in a moment. This is the sort of what we call the lifestyle medicine model of disease. And on the right is just essentially the chronic diseases that many of you who are doctors and nurses, etc., would have learned about. We learned a little bit about the markers: blood pressure, waist circumference, BMI. We don't learn a lot about the other markers: neurogenesis and neurotrophic factors and oxidative stress and the microbiome and inflammation, that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of interesting science there, but we're trying to attend fundamentally to those determinants, the lifestyle and social determinants of illness, because if we can attend to those, we can address the actual cause, and we can ideally, in many circumstances, actually reverse the disease process. And part of a crucial aspect of lifestyle medicine is addressing, where possible, the social and environmental determinants of health as well. And if you can't necessarily directly change them, then definitely advocating and lobbying for change there and championing that change. And clearly, you know, there's big progress we need to make on many fronts. So this may not be relevant, but I just throw it in because sometimes it comes up. Sometimes people think lifestyle medicine is sort of like alternative medicine or homeopathy or crystals and that sort of stuff. Or it's, you know, just for wealthy people, or it's a one-size-fits-all. It's none of those. It's personalized. It's health equity, meaning everyone deserves the best healthcare, and that includes lifestyle medicine. I've worked in all kinds of populations, people with schizophrenia and severe mental illness wards and public wards and out the bush, and everyone benefits from this care. Everyone's health gets better, and it's just real. It's rigorously evidence-based. So from a global point of view, just to let you know that this is a global movement. So I mentioned the World Lifestyle Medicine Organization, Lifestyle Medicine Global Alliance. There's the Australian College, which helped set up the British College. And likewise, the British College have helped set up a number of others. American College, there's the Philippines. We've now I think there's about 40 to 50 lifestyle medicine colleges and societies around the world now. Your closest would be Nigeria, I believe. I think there's one in South Africa too. And actually, there's this, which I found from the Nigerian Society of Lifestyle Medicine, which is coming up in November 30th to December 1st this year, if you want to go check out a lifestyle medicine conference in Africa. So, I can send that info around later. All right, so let's talk about the science now. Finally, I've made the case. I've talked about the background. Let's get into the science. So, as far as prevention goes, this is perhaps not news, right? Most of us will know that a healthy lifestyle prevents a lot of disease. The case is really how much. And so I've only got one slide on prevention. The rest of this is on treatment. But we know that 4 simple lifestyle choices: not smoking, BMI less than 30, which is still overweight but not obese, 30 minutes of activity a day and healthy diet, which is not a lot, reduces your risk of most chronic diseases by 80%. 90% diabetes, 80% heart disease, about a third to half of cancers. So that's a lot. But if we talk about treatment now, certainly in Australia, I can say that the leading cause of death is coronary artery disease, so atherosclerosis, blockages of the arteries of the heart that block and cause a heart attack or heart failure or something of that nature. There's been, I think I can probably point to between 5 to 10 trials now that have been done over the last 20 years, showing that lifestyle medicine interventions not just slows and prevents further disease, but actually reverses atherosclerosis. So on the picture here, you can see an angiogram, which is the dye inside the left descending artery, coronary artery, and that's sort of moth-eaten and all blocked up by atherosclerosis. After 3 years on a lifestyle medicine program, that's opened right up. And those of us who practiced will have seen this. And it's not just that the atherosclerosis reverses in one place, it reverses in lots of places. So men might get their erections back, or their peripheral vascular disease might get better, or their stroke risk goes down. And when you actually measure this, you can see over these, this one was a 5-year randomized control trial. after 5 years, the average difference was about a 35% difference in stenosis. And that's huge. Difference between 70% stenosis is impending, blockage, and 35% stenosis. And it also stabilizes those plaques, because the plaques, it's not just about size, it's about stability. Those that are more likely to rupture are more likely to cause heart attacks. Lifestyle medicine stabilizes and firms up those plaques, so you get at least half the amount of events occur. Now, diabetes is interesting because, as I said, its prevalence is going completely wild. And in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of research here and about reversing and putting diabetes into remission. This was one of the first published in the Lancet in 2018, where they showed that about 80% of people diabetes could be put into remission with dietary approaches. This has been repeated and repeated and repeated with different approaches ever since. So this is the American Diabetes Association table, where they've gone through different dietary approaches, whether it's Mediterranean, vegan, low fat, low carb, ketogenic, etc., and show that a lot of them can do it of varying degrees. And I'm not sure, apologies, what metric you use for HbA1c and diabetes control in Kenya, but we use percentages, and so I'm not sure if that's helpful, but 2% is a significant drop. Your average medication might produce a 1 to 2% drop. So that's as more than many common medications, but about as much as metformin. So that's great, but actually we can do a lot better than that. Here's a picture from my own clinic. And HbA1c, so the cutoff is 7, as many of you will kind of know, for diabetes control. So this patient came and saw me, their number was 11, which is terribly controlled. In 3 months, just 3 months of a lifestyle medicine program, the HbA1c went down to 6.1, which is in the normal range, and then went down to 5.8, which is what we call normoglycemia now. So that's in the normal person range. So and that was then off medication. So we got to deprescribe those medications. He's reversed their diabetes, and not just that, their energy is better, their vitality is better, their mood is better, their family is happier. All those benefits come too. And if people are, and this trial that was published again in the Lancet a couple of years ago, just kind of goes to show that we're learning so much more, and it's not just about, oh, you need to eat better, right? There's actually, there is a real medicine to this, there's an art to this, and that's why it requires training, because it's not simple, let's say that. Sadly, if you're a dietitian, you'll know that it takes 4 years to become a dietitian. So it's not like an overnight you can become a lifestyle medicine practitioner. But in this trial, which is a randomized control trial, they had guidelines, which was the control group. So they got medications, diet advice, activity advice. They saw a dietitian. So guideline, good care, versus an intensive lifestyle intervention. So the lifestyle intervention was the intervention. And so the results were that in the lifestyle intervention, intensive lifestyle intervention, 61% of people in a matter of months went into remission, versus 12% in the guidelines. So what we're seeing here is actually we need much more than what the simple guidelines are telling us. 33% of people went into what we call normoglycemia, which means they become insulin sensitive again, which means they can tolerate carbohydrates again. And then hence they don't necessarily rebound into diabetes very quickly. And there's a significant difference in the medications after that period. So at 12 months, there was a 3 medication difference. Those in the intensive lifestyle reduced their meds by 1.5. Those in the guideline group increased their meds by 1.5. No serious adverse events either. So just to make that point about diabetes, there's so much we can do. Then there's, I'm just looking at the time, I'm doing okay. Then there's dementia, and there's been some big reports come out in the last few years about this. It used to be that they said, about 5-10% of dementia is modifiable and the rest is genetics. Now they're saying 40% is modifiable, and I suspect as the evidence increases, we will be saying probably 80% in the next 10 years, I predict. But all of these factors that are modifiable are lifestyle largely: hearing impairment, hypertension, smoking, obesity, diabetes, low social contact, education, etc. Hearing impairment, just for your own knowledge, is a big one. It accounts for 8% of global dementias. So get your hearing checked and get a hearing aid if you need it. And there's been trials again where lifestyle interventions have been published in the Lancet, where we know that these actually improve. So lifestyle interventions in people who are at risk of dementia or even mild cognitive impairment, that we can actually improve cognitive function across a number of domains. So it's very good for the brain. And we talk about the brain, there's been some big trials. I'm just going to skim through these quite quickly. It's just to give you a very brief taster. This is a big systematic review that was published recently in Australia, showing that physical activity is very clearly as effective, if not more effective, than medication and psychotherapy for improving your mood, and certainly for the metrics of cognitive health, aka mitochondrial density, neuronal health, microglial health, etc., etc. And I'm happy to explain that another day. This is there's been now 4 randomized controlled trials done to show that this is a modified Mediterranean diet, and to show that it causes remission in about 1/3 of people with moderate to severe depression. So 1/3 of people with moderate to severe depression can go into remission with a Mediterranean diet versus 8% in control. And this has been repeated in young people, middle-aged people, and elderly. And there was a big meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials, which again, over 45,000 people, which again supported these results. And the point here is that we're learning that depression is not just a deficiency in serotonin and the other things one may have learned in medical school, but it's actually a complex entity, which is inflammation-based, it's microbiome-based, it's mitochondrial health-based, and by using targeted lifestyle interventions in medicine, we treat the actual cause. I'm not going to go through that slide for sake of time. I'll just simply say here that the important thing is when we improve we know that lifestyle medicine is effective for depression, anxiety, and there's evidence emerging around schizophrenia, bipolar, and other disorders. And I've written a clinical guideline on this. And we also know it's good for all the physical health conditions as well. And when we look at this chart, which is the risk factors for suicide, actually the biggest risk factors for suicide are a physical health problem and a mood disorder. So again, we're going to be directly affecting the suicide rates as well, and suicide prevention. I mentioned some of the mechanisms, and if you're not looking, please, again, keep your eyes on the road if you're driving. But this is all, I suppose you could say, emerging and evolving over the last 5 years of really understanding the mechanisms, the cellular and molecular mechanisms of lifestyle medicine. So on the left here, I have a paper on diet and mental health. On the right, I have a paper on exercise, which is a very good paper. And I can't go through all these mechanisms, and we do when we teach. But when we talk about reversing insulin resistance, and we talk about improving heart rate variability, and we talk about stimulating mitochondrial biogenesis, meaning thicker, more healthy, robust mitochondria, which is what makes the energy so that all our organs and cells can do the job they're supposed to do, whether it's your neurons for information processing or your immune system to do what it needs to do. So we are giving the body, we're healing essentially fundamentally the body through this practice. I'll just quickly make a point here because it's something I'm very interested in. But I'll make it very quick. Is that coming back down to the actual pathology and pathophysiology of disease? For example, with certain neurological and psychological illnesses, when there is a there's again in the last 5-10 years, we've understood the role of certain parts of the brain, like what are called the microglia. Now, the microglia make up about 15% of the total brain cells. And their job is, I think I removed the picture. Yeah, I removed the picture. But they sit in between the synapses of neurons and regulate signals and messages back and forth. Now, they respond to stress in the body, physical or psychological stress. So if a person has diabetes or metabolic syndrome, and they've got lots of social stress, and they've got psychological stress, then that tells the microglia to put the brain into a heightened state that is neuroinflammatory. So the microglia actually switch. They're the derivatives of macrophages, meaning they are immune cells fundamentally. So they create inflammation. When we get inflammation in the brain, what happens is debris builds up, neurotransmitters don't get made, don't get released, enzymes don't function properly, beta amyloid plaques, which lead to Alzheimer's, build, and this sort of thing. And then that leads to symptoms. So what does that lead to? And there's many papers on this. It leads to all the symptoms of depression, to anxiety, to pain sensitivity, to chronic fatigue, to all other kinds of problems. So again, relevant. Now, I'm not going to talk about the gut, sadly, just for sake of time. And when we look at this even better, it doesn't just go down to the cellular mechanisms, it goes down to even our chromosomes. So our chromosomes are the caps on the end, sorry, our telomeres are the caps on the ends of our chromosomes that essentially protect the chromosome from sticking to other things and from eroding around the base. That was a very lay way of explaining it, but that's fundamentally what they do. But they shorten over time. It's called the Hayflick limit. They shorten every time a cell divides. And a shorter telomere is predictive of disease and aging. Now, what's interesting is multiple lifestyle programs have now shown this, but this paper, which is a meta-analysis done about 10 years ago, so it's a very high-level study, which looked at the enzyme telomerase. And what it showed was that mindfulness meditation and other lifestyle interventions activate telomerase, which is the enzyme which adds DNA back onto the end of your telomeres. So it reverses the chromosomal and molecular markers of age. And this has been shown multiple times now. And we look at it, it also changes epigenetic expression profoundly. So this was a prostate cancer trial and a lifestyle intervention. They showed that it changed 500 gene expressions. So 50 were upregulated, 450 were downregulated, all in the profile of anti-cancer. And there's lots of great research going on now into oncology in all of this, into fasting, certain specific dietary approaches like ketogenic low-carb diets, exercising after meals to reduce the availability of sugar to cancer cells. And this is where personalized lifestyle medicine will be the future. And I'll just simply whet your appetite with that, because there's a very exciting way of personalizing, both from a metric point of view, from a anthropometric point of view, meaning measuring of human data, like waist circumference and neck circumference, etc. And putting it all together to personalize, and fundamentally that's where it's going. So it all adds up. It's effective, it's biopsychosocially, culturally, and spiritually effective. This is a picture one of my patients gave me who had a pretty severe mental illness. These are all the things that she sort of incorporated into her life. And as you can see, it's not just fasting and other things. Self-compassion was part of it. Social connection was part of it. Empowerment was a part of it. And I know we all do this. I'm sure you all do this to some degree, but lifestyle medicine is really committing and expanding and building your skill set and repertoire and knowledge. It's also very safe. So in the last 10 minutes, I'm just going to sort of comment on how do you connect people to these. Now, this clearly depends on where you are, but I think most of us will recognize that, sort of like this picture, that we constantly trying to make one model, which is a medication procedural model, fit every problem. And we actually need more tools in the toolbox. Sometimes you do need a drill press, but sometimes you actually just need a screwdriver or a hammer. And lifestyle medicine just expands the number of tools. And the models of care, we need to think like that too. So this is a little onion ring model we published last year. And the point simply being, and we don't have to go through all of it, is we think about the one-to-one care that we deliver, but then we think about optimizing that with lifestyle and all health coaching and behavior change experience and knowledge and skills. But then we zoom out and think about the practices and the systems. Is that primary care? Is it community care? Is it hospital-based tertiary care? How can we review the process and the journey with which a patient goes on through this system and implant, at ideally the most efficient way possible, lifestyle medicine? Is it peer support components? Is it digital components? Is it bringing family in? Is it doing group like things? There's so many options, and that in the end of the day gets personalized. I'm not going to talk about that for sake of time. I've already talked about that. Some of the stuff that's going on is rather big across the world at the moment, what are called shared medical appointments. So this is, I can think of projects in pretty much most societies of lifestyle medicine. And essentially the point is if you get, it's essentially group therapy, but in a lifestyle medicine sense. You get a lot of people with diabetes or whoever together, and it's a structured way of delivering that care. But we've got over 400 published papers on it now, showing it improves outcomes. You get better outcomes than one-to-one care. It's more time efficient. It's more cost effective. People prefer it on average, not everyone, but most people. You can do it video and Zoom if you need to. And we've done it, and I think I'll go here. We've done it in Aboriginal communities for about 5 years now. We call them medical yarn ups there because it's just the language that is more appropriate. And what's great about it is you get this peer component, this community component, people bring in traditional diets and practices, and you can sort of mold the various types of healing and medicine together. Here's another model where we, with new mums, essentially we would do groups with new mums, but as focusing on the sleep of baby and the sleep of mum, and the feeding and the rest and the other lifestyle medicine pillars. And we've got GPs in Australia doing that and getting great outcomes. This is a big systematic review and meta-analysis published in 2021, just to show how much of a difference this makes. If you have group programs that are lifestyle medicine based in pregnant women, this you can see on the left here. I'll read out some of them if you can't see this, the beneficial outcomes. So you improve maternal and neonatal outcomes, reduction in gestational diabetes, preterm delivery, large gestational age, intensive care admissions for the neonates, reduction in maternal adverse outcomes, hypertension, C-sections. And some of these are reductions of about 40 to 60%. So these are not small reductions in improving the outcomes for people. In New Zealand, they've done a lot here with the Maori population and bringing in health coaches and cultural health workers into clinics and working with them and training those cultural health workers in lifestyle medicine. So some health coaching and lifestyle medicine. And then they provide essentially sort of peer support, coaching, social prescribing. And they've found that they've increased their access significantly. So about almost 90% of people are being seen usually within the week now. They've reduced symptoms and improved outcomes. They've reduced prescribing rates because it's not reliant on medication as much, and very high levels of satisfaction. 6 years ago, they started with 5 practices in New Zealand. Now, just recently, I was there a couple of months ago, and we've got up 450 primary care sites now have this model in place. So this is all sort of happening around the world where we're searching for answers and we're utilizing the local skill sets and ideas and concepts to create grassroots solutions. I could go on and on, obviously, so I'm going to wrap up, but this is another program in the Netherlands where they used social media as well, and that's obviously much more applicable for certain populations, and again saw significant improvements. This is a model in UK where which is probably one of my favorite models, where essentially they recognize that about half of what they see is not medical, it's psychosocial. You know, it's accommodation problems or food security or, you know, abuse or, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And so they started inviting people from the community to, after being, you know, vetted and interviewed, so to speak, to run various classes in the health centers. And that may not sound like a revolutionary concept, but when you roll it out en masse, which it's now been rolled out, you know, about over 200 practices, 250 practices in the UK now have this collaborative model where there are hundreds of classes being run by the community. Or they may just be helping out in the clinic, flu clinics and other things, or they might be running cooking classes or dance classes or social connection classes or whatever, just rebuilding that culture and that community in a healing way. And then hospitals. And I know some of you are hospital based, you might be thinking, well, this doesn't sound that relevant to me. It really is. I mean, a lot of people are in hospital, they don't know why they're really there. They don't know what they can do to improve their own health. And there's a lot that can be done during admissions because you're catching people at a very relevant time, but especially before. So I've got one of my master's students is an anesthetist, and he's just seeing, he said, I just can't take it anymore. Over the last 10 years, just more and more people are coming in who are overweight and have diabetes and heart problems. And the risk of doing an anesthetic now is so high that, you know, it's causing us so much stress from an elective admission, well, all surgery point of view. But he has his master's thesis and project is developing lifestyle medicine programs for the 3 months before people come in for elective surgery. So he can optimize their physiological state and therefore reduce complications, improve their healing rates, improve the outcomes, reduce medications, etc. And he, you know, his patients are telling me, no one has ever spoken to me like this is the best service ever. So there is a lot that can be done, and I suppose that's where it gets fun. Now you're all here, so you're already all on the left of the curve, but many of you will know that when we're trying to create change in any system, one of the theories that appears to be pretty true is what's called Rogers diffusion of innovation, which is that you always get the people who are the sort of innovators who come up with the idea, the early adopters who start building the movement. But until you get about 18 to 20% of the population involved, you don't get a big shift. But when you get over 20% of the population, you start seeing a shift. So when 20% of people start using Facebook or buying iPhones, lots of people will use it. So ideally, what we're trying to do here is create a movement for the benefit of everyone. And so you're here on the left, so good on you. But my advice to you is identify those other innovators and early adopters, network, build the movement, and make some good change. You also might be wondering, what can you do from career point of view in lifestyle medicine? There's so much you can do. You can practice it clinically in any and many settings. You can get into academia research. You can consult the government. So many opportunities in government and defense and industry and tech and education, media, entrepreneur, and just general leadership. And of course, that's it for me. That's the last slide. But there's so much more I wish I could share with you, and there's so much more I'd love to hear from you. But sadly, we just don't have the time this morning. But I hope nonetheless that was useful for you. And it's